Dan, sorry for the interruption, but you're on mute right now.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining our event, the Integrated Program for Better Air Quality in Asia, Technology Roundtable and Fair for Combating Air Pollution and Climate Change in Asia. I am Dang Espita Casanova, Program Manager of Cleaner Asia, and I will be your host for the opening plenary. A few reminders to guide us before we start our session. Please be reminded that the whole event is recorded in video and chat. Participants are requested to send their questions and comments via the question and answer box and chat box. Facilitators and or resource speakers will respond via chat or live if time permits within the session. Interpretation function is available. Please click the headset logo on the lower right-hand side of the screen and choose the relevant language. Please mute the original video or original audio rather to hear the translation. If you are experiencing slow internet, click the HD button and change to LD. You may review the completed sessions by clicking Watch Replay under the Schedule tab. Let your voices be heard and participate in the polls that are running throughout the event. You could also set up tables and interact with fellow air quality and climate change makers at the lounge. And we would like to invite everyone to share the event on social media by using the hashtag Tech for Clean Air. Now, to officially open the event, we would like to call on Attorney Glinda Bathan Baterina, who is the Deputy Executive Director of Cleaner Asia. Glinda has more than 20 years' experience in air quality management. She was a member of the legal team which assisted the Philippine government in drafting the Clean Air Act of the 1999 implementing rules and regulations. She also led the implementation of the Asia Clean Fuels and Vehicles, notably the Vietnam and Philippine regulations mandating Euro 4 vehicle emission and fuel standards, and also Pakistan's roadmap for cleaner fuels and vehicles. Glinda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dan. I hope you can hear me well. I hear a little bit of an echo, but it should be okay. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge our special guests, Mr. Koki Azuma from the Ministry of Environment of Japan, our partners of the IBAQ program, the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, and the Asia Center for Air Pollution Research, government officials from ministries and city agencies across Asia. So happy to see you here, new and old partners of Clean Air Asia, representatives of featured technology companies like Green Blue Corporation, Clarity Movement, IQ Air, Horiba, Kademo, Karen EV Asia, and Shaizen Malaysia. I hope that I pronounce your companies correctly. Otherwise, please do so when you introduce yourselves in the later sessions. Of course, I'd like to acknowledge our experts and practitioners from the region and other parts of the world, and representatives from civil society organizations who are partners with us in capacity building in Asia. Now, this roundtable and fair uh, has really been an effort to understand city technology needs, because this is a crucial step for effective and scalable action on air pollution reduction and climate change mitigation. The IBAQ program scoped for these technology needs in the cities of Cambodia, Indonesia, Myanmar, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, particularly on air pollution and climate emissions monitoring and control. Now, this scoping focused on air quality monitoring and air and climate emissions reduction for major sources in key Southeast Asian countries. This exercise also assessed related measures that could improve technology adoption and enforcement capacity in the countries. Now, the scoping capitalized on information that was derived from different and several needs assessment initiatives by the IBAQ program partners. So the results of these needs assessment and all of the knowledge gained was used to inform the agenda for this event. Now, on the objectives of the roundtable, we have targeted, of course, the cities in Southeast Asia and ensuring that they are matched with companies in the region, particularly Japan and other countries. So, for the key objectives, we really note in our first objective that the current climate and air pollution crises requires matching our cities with the companies that supply, install, and finance technological solutions to air pollution and climate change. This is very critical. And we found out that there is often a gap between cities and technology providers. And that's why we find that having an online forum and ensuring that co innovation happens are very key steps to help fill this gap. So today, I welcome you all to this roundtable and technology fair, and I look forward to fruitful and meaningful discussions with you, the cities, and the companies that are here with us to share all your innovation. Good morning, and back to you, Dang.
Thank you so much, Miss Glinda. And of course, we would like to acknowledge and recognize the support of the Integrated Program for Better Air Quality in Asia and the Ministry of Environment of Japan for making this event possible. Now we would like to call on Mr. Koki Azuma, Counselor for Transboundary Air Pollution Analysis, General Affairs Division, Environment Management Bureau of the Ministry of Environment of Japan. He is in charge of all acid deposition monitoring network in Asia, ENET, and other roles related to air quality. He has been working for the government of Japan for over 30 years in the field of environmental protection, waste management, and water resource management. Before his current assignment, he was dispatched to the Kingdom of Cambodia as expert of water supply for the Japan International Cooperation Agency. Mr. Azuma, the floor is yours.
Sorry, microphone was off. Thank you. Good morning again. My name is Koki Azuma, Counselor for Transboundary Air Pollution Analysis in the Japanese Ministry of the Environment. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, thank you. My name is Koki Azuma, Counselor for Transboundary Air Pollution Analysis in the Japanese Ministry of the Environment. First of all, on behalf of the Ministry, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to all those participating today and those involved in the preparation, despite in such a difficult situation caused by COVID-19. The Japanese Ministry of the Environment has long been supporting co-benefit approaches to improve air quality while reducing CO2 emissions by way of multilateral frameworks and bilateral cooperation among Asian countries. The Integrated Program on Better Quality IBAQ was launched in 2014 as a cooperation program between the Ministry of the Environment and Clean Air Asia. Since then, the program has been promoting air quality management and climate change countermeasures in the Asian region through various activities, including giving assistance to develop plans for municipal cities and conducting capacity building for government officials. Today, I'm so grateful that we have a lot of participants from many different sectors. I'm very much looking forward to active discussions, and I'm wishing that today's seminar will serve as a forum for sharing data and useful knowledge. Finally, I also expect that the seminar will contribute to deepening further cooperation between the public and private sectors, which results in improving the atmospheric environment and climate change in the Asian region. Thank you so much. Go back to you, Dan.
Thank you so much, Azuma-san, for those kind words. And now I would like to provide an overview of our event. As Attorney Glenda earlier pointed out, the objectives of this event are to introduce the IBAQ program and related initiatives to the participants. We'd also like to foster a dialogue among policymakers, technology users, and technology providers on opportunities for transferring air quality monitoring, transport, and renewable energy technologies to address air pollution and climate change in Southeast Asian cities. We would like also to determine and understand more on how IBAQ program and the related initiatives can support the transfer and tailoring of technologies through co-innovation. As an overview, we would have two sessions in the morning. First is the opening plenary and a sharing on air quality monitoring, transport, and renewables technology needs of cities in Southeast Asia. We would then have a lunch and networking break from 11:30 to 1 p.m. Manila time. We will then resume our session at 1 p.m. to usher in technology providers and give us an overview of their technology portfolios and programs that aim to meet the needs of cities in Southeast Asia. And then after a quick mobility break, we will return with a session on co-innovation and financing for technology cooperation in Southeast Asian cities. And we will be closing the program at about 3:20 p.m. in the afternoon. I would like to also take this opportunity to briefly introduce the IBAQ program and Cleaner Asia. We are an international non-governmental organization that leads the mission for better air quality and healthier, more livable cities in Asia. And we are part of a UN-recognized partnership with a network comprised of more than 250 organizations around the world, including country networks: Indonesia, Malaysia, Nepal, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. Clean Air Asia's mission is to reduce air pollution and GHG emissions in Asia and contribute to a more sustainable, equitable, and healthier region. And we do this by grounding our work on three pillars. One is on informing for action, where we gather data and information and analyze them to produce knowledge products and to drive awareness raising and communication campaigns among actors. We also provide training and workshops and also hands on practical guide to cities and national governments on air quality, climate change, and related issues and areas. And all these lead to policy guidance that is science and evidence based to drive change on the ground. Our work with cities and national governments have been centered on the development and implementation of clean air action plans with focus on measures that harness the co-benefits of air quality and climate actions. You would see in this slide that we have helped and assisted several cities in the region in the assessment of air quality and climate emissions and using that knowledge to craft solutions and institutionalize them in clean air action plans. As Azuma-san mentioned in his opening remarks, the Ministry of Environment of Japan started a cooperation with Clean Air Asia, the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, and the Asia Center for Air Pollution Research in 2014, which is called the Integrated Program for Better Air Quality in Asia, or the IBAQ Program. And the program's main aim is to improve air quality and contribute to more livable and healthy cities in the region, with focus on cities with high impact potential and potential for leveraging wider change. The IBAQ has core components on capacity building, technology transfer, and development and implementation of clean air action plans. The program started in 2014 and is ongoing up to the present and supported by the Ministry of Environment of Japan. The core product or the core knowledge product of the IBQ program is the guidance framework for better air quality in Asian cities. It set out the long term vision for urban air quality in Asia and provided clear cut guidance in operationalizing the long term vision. Its primary target audience are policy and decision makers at the national and local levels. It includes or it contains guidance areas based on priority areas of concern that have been identified by different government partners within the region. And it also allows us to ascertain our air quality management capacity by providing concrete indicators to gauge level of improvement. It provides roadmaps to show progress for each of the guidance areas and recommendations with case studies on implementing the roadmaps. You may access the guidance framework in the link provided here and in the chat. So the guidance framework works by providing us with the capacity to put together or to establish the knowledge base that would tell us the level of pollution, that would identify the sources of pollution, and that would determine the impacts of pollution in our respective governments. And we will use that knowledge base to craft or to identify solutions at the national through policies and frameworks, at the local level through cleaner action plans and distinct or specific measures and programs, and also at the individual and community level. And these are the actions that we can take on and really drive from our respective households and communities. These solutions are institutionalized and are um, put together into cleaner action plans that are developed with the cities and operationalized according to their respective resources and capacities. Through the years, we were able to train or to build the capacity of over 1,500 practitioners and representatives from the government and other sectors working on air quality and climate change, on health, on planning, and other related disciplines. We have developed the IBAQ Learning Portal and City Solutions Toolkit to provide guidance and e-learning courses on how to implement the guidance framework. And we have put together materials and information materials that would guide cities on the formulation and implementation of cleaner action plans. And through the IBAQ program, what we have done so far in the region is assisted governments in the um, in assessing their air quality and climate emissions state. And through this, we have enabled them to also develop their roadmaps for air quality management. We have helped governments to set air quality targets and put this into their clean air action plans. We have helped governments as well in generating air quality monitoring data, emission inventories, as well as mapped health outcomes attributed to air pollution. All of these were encompassed in cleaner action plans. And the next step would be, of course, to support the implementation of actions and adoption of solutions. And these are in the form of policies and technologies. And that is why we have come together for this event to really look into how we can fast track and advance the adoption of technology and best practices, and will be supported by a co-innovation approach, which we will delve into deeper later in session 4, where we would have partners who will really provide us insights and their perspectives on how we can translate these solutions into change at the ground level. So, with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Eric Zussman. Sorry for that. Who will be discussing a report which will give us a background on the ASEAN solutions, which follows the UNEP 25 Clean Air Measures and Solutions report that was published in 2018. I'm sorry. So Dr. Eric Zussman is a senior policy researcher and a research director at the Center for Sustainability Governance of the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. He holds a bachelor's degree in Mandarin Chinese from Rutgers University and a dual master's degree in public policy and Asian studies from the University of Texas at Austin, and a PhD in political science from the University of California, Los Angeles. For much of the past 2 decades, he has conducted research on environmental issues in Asia. So I would like to call on Eric, and over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dong, and really excited to be here today with colleagues from the Ministry of Environment Japan, Clean Air Asia, and wonderful collaborators from private sector and cities, as well as some international organizations. And as Don correctly noted, I'm going to be providing an overview of a report we're working on with colleagues from the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis and Stockholm Environment Institute. And without further ado, I'd like to go to my slides, and I think this will help us really frame much of the discussion of not only solutions, but ways that the private and public sector can work together to accelerate their adoption and scale them up. Okay, so as noted, the title of my presentation is Clean Air Solutions in ASEAN, Southeast Asia, and I'd like to go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the first point that I really want to emphasize is for government officials, for civil society, for international organizations, and the private sector, there are few opportunities to invest in technologies that will deliver bigger returns than combating air pollution. Okay, the costs of air pollution run particularly high in Southeast Asia, and you can see this by looking at this graph or diagram right here, where we see the number of what we call disability-adjusted life years. Disability-adjusted life years is basically a way of saying the number of years that you either lose from premature death or that are impaired from some type of disease related to air pollution. And you can see for many of the countries in ASEAN, these numbers are particularly high, and they even parallel countries. For instance, we tend to think of China as having very serious air pollution problems, but for several countries in the region, this disability-adjusted life years are on parallel or even higher. So combating air pollution is really important, and it's a really good investment of money. I'm going to make a similar point in the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? And for instance, on a global basis, when we look at the impacts of different types of disease and risks, on a global basis, air pollution comes in fourth, just below blood pressure, tobacco, and dietary risks, threatening the lives of about 7 million people on an annual basis. This is 2019 data. And in many countries in ASEAN, you would find similar levels of threats. So this is really important, and a really important area for us to invest money and resources in order to improve health and well-being. Can we please go to the next slide too? Now, of course, many of the solutions to air pollution also have benefits for climate change, both long-term and near-term climate change. And what we're also realizing is that the concerns over climate change are becoming increasingly high in ASEAN. So, for instance, a recent poll taken by the ASEAN Straits Times showed that in countries such as Philippines and Vietnam, the concerns over climate change or having great impacts of climate change, about 75% of those surveyed said that climate change was already having a great impact on their livelihoods. And this is also reinforced, for instance, by recent work done by Greenwatch, which looked at climate risks between 2000 and 2019. And out of all of the countries surveyed, 3 countries in ASEAN came within the top 10: Myanmar, Philippines, and Thailand. Of course, this sort of data is no surprise to many of the city officials that are with us today. I think many of city governments are recognizing that climate change is a problem here and now, and it's an existential threat. I mean, it really poses a significant threat to the well-being and livelihoods of many of the populations in cities in ASEAN and Southeast Asia. So here we have sort of a twin crisis, right? We have an air pollution crisis and a climate change crisis. But as I implied before, there are many opportunities to address this crisis with a single set of solutions. And when we were talking about the co-benefits approach from Azuma-san, he mentions co-benefits approach. Those type of solutions that can attack both climate change and air pollution deliver benefits for both areas. They deliver co-benefits. So can we go to the next slide, please, to take a look at some of these opportunities? So some of these opportunities have been highlighted in a recent report we're working on. And what this report shows writ large at a very high level is that if countries in Southeast Asia would implement 15 different solutions they could more than double the population breathing clean air by 2030. When I say clean air, our definition here is below 10 micrograms per cubic meter of PM 2.5, one of the most threatening types of air pollutants. And can we keep on moving on this slide, please? And so not only does it have this opportunity to double the number of people breathing clean air, but also if we look at the comparison between what we see as existing legislation and all of the different measures here, many of the most serious air pollution problems, or the really high levels of air pollution, would basically be eliminated if we would implement all of these 15 measures. So we double the number of people breathing clean air, and then we remove many of the really, really serious threats to health from air pollution. So big opportunity here to improve the health and well-being and of people in ASEAN, and also to address climate change. So then the next question I'm sure you're asking, and this is a big question for especially policymakers, are what are some of these solutions? So can we go to the next slide, please? So here are our 15 solutions. They're actually broken up into 12 categories, but they're focusing on things ranging from household energy use, so residential energy use such as clean cooking or switching to LPG. Then we also have many solutions in the power and industrial sector, and we put in post-combustion controls and industrial process standards here. But later in the session, we're going to be talking about renewable energy, and renewable energy would also follow under that category. And then, of course, one of our sessions will focus a lot on transportation. And here I really want to highlight 2 points. One is we have this vehicle inspection and maintenance. So one of our sessions we'll hear from colleagues at Horiba, who will show us, how they're running vehicle inspection and maintenance technologies in Japan. And we can think about how that might be transferable to countries and cities in Southeast Asia. We also have opportunities for tightening emission standards, and this also includes e-vehicles, which will be another area we talk about later in our sessions. In addition to this, I would like to highlight there's many growing opportunities in the agricultural sector, which we tend to not necessarily pay too much attention to, but for instance, changing fertilizer use or dietary changes has big potential. And then there's also some opportunities in terms of waste management, reducing the amount of waste that's burnt, and also doing this by introducing circular economy type solutions or improving our waste management strategies. And then last but not least, we have some opportunities by preventing forest and peatland fires, and then also reducing methane from coal, oil, and gas production. That methane turns into ozone, which also has an impact on our air quality and climate change. So we have 15 solutions. This report that we're working on should come out in the next 2 to 3 months or so, and I'm really happy to preview some of this for you today. Can we go to the next slide, please? And as you can see here, by implementing these solutions, of course, will not only have big impacts across the region, but also big impacts in particular countries and cities within ASEAN. And as you can see from this slide, countries ranging from Vietnam to Malaysia to Laos to Indonesia, by implementing these solutions, we're going to be able to get countries a lot closer to the WHO clean air previous clean air guidelines. They've actually tightened the guidelines over the past year or so. And then once again, this will have big impacts on health and also big impacts on climate change. So really big opportunities in particular cities and particular countries, bringing air quality down to recommended levels and making our populations healthier and making our cities more livable. Can we please go to the next slide? Okay, now the really good news here is not only do we have some analysis that shows us the potential for these solutions, but there are good success stories in the region already implementing some of these solutions. So I want to highlight 2 here in this slide. One, And this picture, the big picture, comes from the Bangkok Metropolitan Authority. And one of the things that the city of Bangkok has been able to do is for their bus program, they've been able to introduce a very nice inspection and maintenance program to make sure that the buses that are running, if they need repair, they get the repair. And this also helps to make sure that we reduce, high levels of emission. In many cities, these what we call super emitting vehicles that haven't been repaired for a long time and tend to be older, they can constitute upwards of 50% of the emissions from the transport sector. So there is already some success in the region of trying to reduce some of these super emitting vehicles, and we want to build upon that success. And of course, one of the success stories that's not featured here, but we'll hear about perhaps a little bit later in the transport session, is Tokyo. And now all of Japan has a very strong inspection and maintenance program, and this will be crucial, I think, for countries and cities in ASEAN. Another success story that's beginning to gather some momentum, of course, is e-vehicles. And we see the smaller picture right here of an e-taxi that's run by the taxi service Bluebird in Indonesia. And I think for many of us who have come into Indonesia and been through Jakarta, Bandung, Bogor, many of the cities that surround Jakarta and the Jabodetabek region, they've taken a taxi from Bluebird service, and they're beginning to integrate this in the e-vehicles into their services. And I think this demonstrates there's significant potential for scaling up, especially at the top end of the vehicle fleet, e-vehicles. So some good successful examples already. Can we go to the next slide, please? And we also see that some of these examples are being driven by shifts in policy. So we see some governments, at the national level, adopting more stringent emission standards for vehicles. I know there's been a push, for instance, in Indonesia and Thailand to try to adopt more stringent emission standards. This is just for light-duty vehicles, but also we see this for heavy-duty vehicles. And this is also helping to promote some of these changes that are consistent with these 15 different solutions that we're recommending. So policy is driving some of this change, technology is driving some of this change, and we do see some successes already in the region. So this is a great thing, and this is a good news for the region, and good news for technology providers too. Can we go to the next slide, please? And one of the other things that's driving some of this change, above and beyond this, let's say, the technological solutions themselves, is what we might call enabling technologies and enabling reforms. And what I mean by that is we see the growing use of monitoring technologies and also citizen science. And so what we see here is an example of initiative taken by the CSO group Earth in Thailand, where they're doing work using low-cost emission sensors in Samut Sakhon province to try to promote changes in policy, changes in technology, raising people's awareness, so they put more pressure on governments, but also help governments to try to strengthen their regulations and support some of the 15 different solutions. So we have both, government-led changes. We also have the sort of bottom-up led changes supported by different types of technologies. And my colleague, I think, later in our renewable session, will talk a little bit about this socio-technological change. Society working with technology to try to promote changes that are good for climate change and also good for air quality. Can we go to our next slide, please? Now, many of the actions that I've highlighted so far are being spearheaded by cities. I mean, if you look in the sort of research and if you look in practice, what we noticed is cities are often more flexible and more resourceful than sometimes national governments. And they might have better knowledge of the types of solutions that work in their own context. And so what we see happening in many cities, this includes cities like Bogor and Quezon, which will be featured in our next section, is they're actually taking the initiative to introduce climate change and air pollution strategies. So for instance, Dong, in her presentation, she mentioned the city of Santa Rosa, which is putting forward a climate change and air pollution strategy that integrates the two. And here we can see emission levels that might change due to climate change strategies. And those climate change strategies in Bogor and Quezon would also have, to use the language from Ozuma-san, would also have co-benefits for air quality and health. And they could also deliver other things that are sometimes covered under what we call the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, that could also have positive effects on creating jobs and energy security. So all types of benefits that can be delivered by cities adopting and strongly implementing climate change strategies and air pollution strategies. And we're really grateful to have some cities here that are taking sort of the initiative, like Bogor and Quezon. And we look forward to working more with these cities moving forward. Can I go to the next slide, please? Okay, now, one of the big questions then, right, is we have cities that are taking the initiative, we have some positive policy changes, we have some good examples of success stories of the 15 different solutions. So you might be scratching your head to yourself right now, well, okay, Eric, what else do we need? Well, I've given you a lot of good news so far. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a slight reality check. And this reality check is going to suggest that if we really want to implement these 15 solutions quickly, when I say quickly, over the next 5 to 10 years, and we want to do it at a wide scale, really we need to think about some of the barriers to implementation. And some of these barriers can be pretty high. Okay, and so what one of my colleagues and I, Kaoru Akahoshi, and I have done is we've looked at some of these solutions and we've done surveys and literature review of what might be some of the barriers to some of the solutions and how high might they be. And we've broken up this, what we call barriers analysis, into technological barriers, economic barriers, so technological referring to the lack of technologies, economic barriers being some of the high initial costs for investing in some of these solutions. Social barriers, sometimes low user acceptance can be a challenge. And institutional and policy barriers, sometimes the policy environment might not be so good. Sometimes there might be a lack of capacity or coordination within government agencies that would be needed to support some of these things. And what you can see is for some of these solutions, here we have some of the solutions focusing on transport, as well as clean cooking and open burning. Well, some of these barriers can be quite high. And what we've estimated here is just this is our own assessment of some literature to try to understand how high they might be. The darker colors tend to indicate a higher barrier. The lighter colors, a lower barrier. And we've put this together in what we call a feasibility framework. This is, how feasible is it really to implement these solutions in the next 10 years if we don't do anything to overcome these barriers? And then we've actually taken a step further. Can we go to the next slide, please? And in that step further, what we've done is we've surveyed approximately 30 to 40 different experts and policymakers. This is mostly from Thailand, but also from other countries in Southeast Asia, and tried to understand to what extent, if we don't do anything to overcome these barriers, to what extent we're going to be able to implement them quickly and on a large scale over the next 10 years. And what these numbers are suggesting is if you have 70% or 60%, that's approximately slowing down the implementation of these different solutions by that percentage. And so what you would see is, for instance, over a 10-year period, if we didn't introduce a good policy environment, if we didn't raise awareness of the solutions, if we didn't lower their costs, and if we didn't make technology more available, then this could slow down the implementation of these solutions by anywhere from, let's say, 5 to 7 years or so. And so what I want to suggest to you is we have some good examples, some good success stories, and to move them forward, we really need to invest our energies and our efforts and our minds in how to overcome some of these barriers. And this is going to require working across the private and public sector, and working with different development organizations to fill financing gaps. And this collaborative effort of building cooperation across these different actors and also across these different countries and learning from each other as we go along is what I'm going to call, can we go to the next slide, please? Is what I'm going to call co-innovation. And this co-innovation process, one of my colleagues, Dr. Nandu Janardanan, is also, I think, participating in this session and will present with us or moderate the last session. He's helped to take this idea and apply it more and more to technology transfer. And I think it applies very well to many of the discussions that we're going to have today. So co-innovation involves working with different technologies and best practices, both technological hardware and software, and then going through a process of co-designing, co-producing, and monitoring, and then gradually scaling up our solutions. And then by doing that, we hope to deliver environmental benefits, air quality benefits, climate change benefits. We also hope to deliver economic benefits. This can range from jobs to stimulating the economy, and then social benefits, increased employment rates, and also reducing sickness and health, improving health. All of these different benefits, by recognizing these benefits, we can then feed this back into our process and then incentivize more innovation and more solutions that work in cities, communities, and all the way, of course, up to the national level. So we see this co-innovation process as being quite central to the effort that's going on here today. We see co-innovation as critical to overcoming some of the barriers to the quick and wide-scale implementation of these 15 different solutions. And we see this co-innovation as sitting at the heart of the discussions that we're going to have over the next approximately 4 hours or so, of course, with a little lunch break in between. And we're really, really delighted to have so many different colleagues with us engage within this co-innovation process. So with that, I would like to stop or go to the last slide where I hit my key messages. Okay, so my first message really is that Southeast Asia is experiencing a twin air pollution and climate change crisis. Okay, and this crisis, I think, is something that many of our colleagues that are on this session experience on an everyday basis. And so this is something that we need to address with a great deal of urgency. It's happening now, and so we need solutions. And I demonstrated for you there's 15 different solutions that would help bring clean air to more than twice the people in Southeast Asia, or double the amount of people that would have clean air over the next 10 years, raising that level to approximately 500 million people. So huge, huge benefits. And once again, there are a few places better where government, private sector, international development community can invest their resources. Now, the good news is, of course, there has been some success implementing many of these solutions. So I highlighted a few key places, for instance, inspection and maintenance and e-vehicles. We're also going to talk a little bit about renewable energy too, as well as some of the enabling reforms and enabling technologies, especially for monitoring. And increasingly that success is and will be led by cities. So we're grateful to have colleagues from Santo, from Quezon, from Bogor, and also from Cambodia, representing colleagues from Phnom Penh. And then last but not least, to really make sure that we implement these solutions quickly and at scale, we need to think about this process of co-innovation, of matching different stakeholder interests and building a collaborative learning process where technology providers, cities, and other key stakeholders work together to make sure that technologies work for Southeast Asia. So I will stop there, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eric, for that very informative session. We have a couple of questions that was sent via chat. So if I think we still have time for a couple. Is it okay if I call you back on the stage to respond? Eric? Okay, I can see you now. Thank you. Thank you so much. So the first question is, in the chat, like several participants upvoted a question which states that which among the solutions you presented are directly based on technology? Could you respond to that?
So the majority of the solutions involve technology. And so, for instance, let me focus on the transportation solutions. So in terms of the emission standards and transport solutions, so the emission standards, of course, would involve improving the design and the operation of vehicles, but also it includes e-vehicles, which has some obvious technological component. And then in vehicle inspection and maintenance, also has a technological component to it too. And similarly for power and industry, this requires some technological change, unquestionably. But I think the thing I would like to really highlight in regard to this question is technology by itself will not solve the problem. It's a critical part of the equation, but I think one of the things we heard when we prepared for this session, for instance, from one of our colleagues at Chatamo, who are working on e-charging stations. So of course, for e-vehicles, you need not only the e-vehicle, you need the charging station, but you also need the drive and support from the governments to change the policies. So technological change is absolutely crucial, but it needs to be complemented by policy changes and supporting technologies. And so it's I think for all of the solutions, there's some technological component, but it's necessary but not sufficient. And that's really why I'm glad we have some of the city policymakers here, and that's really why I think we're focusing a lot on this co-innovation process as highlighting the different elements that need to go together and the collaborative learning that needs to go together to make technology successful. Thank you. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much, Eric. Another question, I think we have time for this one last question. If you would provide advice for the city decision makers and policy makers in the room as to the best approach to determine the low-hanging fruits or those measures that and issues that need to be prioritized based on your slide. I think you showed earlier a framework when you looked into the different barriers. So if you could provide advice to our city managers in the room, that would be great.
Sure. Okay, so first, in terms of some of the low-hanging fruit, I think so. One thing that I've emphasized quite a bit is this inspection and maintenance programs. I think there's a lot of opportunity to improve these programs that will deliver really significant benefits. But one of the big challenges and one of the barriers is a lot of times colleagues or people who are driving vehicles that need maintenance and repair, they might be, don't have the resources necessarily to invest in those type of repairs. So I would suggest two things here. First, I think we need to look at ways to motivate and incentivize people to participate in these programs, but also provide resources for helping them to fix vehicles so that they're, not penalized by these programs. So that's one thing. And two, the second thing is I think that there's also a lot of opportunities for sharing experiences within the region and also within ASEAN, and also with colleagues, for instance, from Japan, from Tokyo, that have had some success with these programs. So that's potentially low-hanging fruit if we can get the policy environment right. And then the second thing is, I think one of the things we experienced when we were preparing for this meeting, and it became actually very clear to me, one of my colleagues who was helping prepare for this meeting was Mayuko Ono-san. And, she was talking about the renewable energy session. And she said, one of the things that would be great for cities is if they can clearly show what some of their needs are for renewable energy, and put that into either their air pollution plans or their climate change plans or their energy plans. I think a strong signal coming from some of the cities on how they hope to move forward with renewable energy will be really, really good for the cities and give some of them a first mover advantage. And I think we see some of this happening in Vietnam already, and Philippines to a certain extent. But the more comprehensive and the more detailed the plan is on renewable energy, I think will help the cities, and I think will also help smooth the transition to clean energy resources. And I think, for instance, not to look at too broad of a geopolitical level, but I think, some of the tensions we see now, for instance, in Ukraine and Russia, are pushing us more and more towards, clean energy. And I think that the more that cities can prepare for that and signal to technology companies that, we're willing to invest in this, I think that will put them in a very good place to achieve some of the co-benefits from this type of transition. So those are two suggestions: inspection and maintenance, and then making sure that the clean energy is a strong component of your air pollution plans and your clean energy, of your climate change plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eric. And indeed, we will be tackling those two issues along with air quality monitoring in our afternoon session. But before that, we would be joined by four representatives from city and also national governments in our next session at 10 a.m. And I would like the 125 people in the room to go back to the lobby and click join the session on session 2, sharing air quality monitoring, transport, and renewables technology needs of cities in Southeast Asia. So we will be starting our session at around 10 a.m. So we will see you there shortly. So thank you so much, and we will be back in a bit. Thank you.